What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Carl Smith of Bureau of Digital. And Carl, before I formally introduce you, I like to shout out to some great episodes of the podcast people should check out. Ryan Watson. Ryan Watson's a partner at Upsourced Accounting. The firm, they help creative companies evaluate financial progress. Actually, Jimmy from Outsourced Accounting introduced us. I mean, I already knew of you because John Corcoran, my business partner, had you on his podcast. He's been a part of Bureau of Digital before too. So people can check that episode out on Smart Business Revolution. So check out the one with Ryan Watson. It was a really good one. Also, you were mentioning some of the amazing webinars you have at Bureau. One of them being, Should I Stay or Should I Go? I had Todd Taskey on the podcast, and he runs the Second Bite podcast. He helps pair agencies with private equity and sell agencies. And sometimes he calls it Second Bite because sometimes they make more on the second bite than they do on the first because of the whole model of the private equity. So check that episode out. And we talked about the valuation, the agency space and landscape and selling and buying businesses. And we'll talk about that on this one as well. And many more on InspiredInsider.com. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their dream relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We do that by helping you run your podcast. And we're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. And we do the strategy, the accountability, and the full execution. So Carl, we kind of call ourselves the magic elves that run in the background and make it look easy for the host and the company so they can create amazing content, create amazing relationships, and most importantly, run their business. You know, for me, the number one thing in my life is relationships, and I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire on this planet and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And I'm excited to introduce Carl Smith. He spent 14 years in advertising before launching his digital agency, nGen Works, in 2003. I don't want to age you, Carl, or anything, but nGen he ran for 12 years, building to over 40 team members, constantly experimenting with the different models of management and team structure. We'll talk about some of the learnings there, and including what he calls the jellyfish model. I don't know if you came up with that or not, but which is flat before flat was cool. And towards the end of nGen's run, Carl actually attended the very first digital event, which is now Bureau of Digital, and actually fell in love with the concept of building community in this web industry. And a few years later, he actually closed nGen to take over the Bureau in 2016. He spends every day now connecting digital professionals to give them the support they need. You can check him out at bureauofdigital.com. Carl, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
So just start us off with the Bureau of Digital and what you do. And if you are listening to the audio version, there is a video version, and I am actually going to share my screen and we will poke around the site here. So talk about Bureau. What are some of the things you do?
The main thing we do is just try to help people find the support they need. So if you're an owner, operator, project manager, creative director, in-house design lead, strategist, which is a weird junk drawer of a category, people have questions. Most of us didn't go to school for what we did. So what we do is we put people together and help them figure out a way forward.
Definitely didn't go to school for what we did.
No.
Right? I know you didn't. I was a biochemistry major, so definitely that didn't prepare me for this. But I want to go back and we'll talk about some of the evolution and some of the interesting things because you have your finger on the pulse of a lot of these things digital agency wise. Talk about the insights of the first meeting event you went to, and you have a special like Harry Potter like book that you even have. So if you hold it up there, if you open it, like literally the spirits of digital will come out. Where did you learn at that first event, or some of the insights?
So we got invited to go. There were about 24 people who were going to this event. And we were invited by these two guys named Greg Hoy and Greg Story, who both ran a company called Happy Cog, but they were different companies. They both licensed the name separately. And they realized they didn't know how to run their companies together. And that led them to realize they didn't know how to run them independently either. So they reached out to about 22 of us who they thought were doing the most innovative stuff. When they sent me an email, I knew who they were, but I was shocked they knew who I was. And so I replied to their email inviting me with 2 words, why me? And they replied back, because our employees have seen you speak. We've been following your blog, and you're either really, really smart or you're totally full of shit. And they said they wanted to know which. And I replied, I would like to know as well. I will be there. So when I got there, the imposter syndrome of sitting there, Kelly Goto was there. She wrote the book, Web Redesign Workflow That Works. Christina Halverson was there, who had come up with the content strategy term. Jeffrey Zeldman, the father of web standards, was there. There are all these people, and I'm sitting there going, why am I here? But one of the first things I realized was that nobody in that room really knew what they were doing. We were all just making it up. You can call it innovative, but it's making shit up. And that's what they were doing. And people that I thought were just crushing it were barely holding on. People that I looked at and thought, I can't believe they're in business, were actually crushing it. And that moment I realized I'm doing fine. Like, I was always pretty much alone. I never wanted to be in charge. I never wanted to run anything. But by default of being the oldest person and being the person who said, and didn't have the skills, I couldn't design or code or do any of that stuff. I was a pretty good writer and I presented well. So I kind of ended up in charge accidentally. But the other things that I learned from being there was that, this stuff is hard. And it doesn't mean we're bad at what we do. It means that it's a lot of innovative stuff with different people. And because of that, it's going to be challenging. I met some of my best friends at that event to this day. Gabe Levine, who, if you ever saw the Fuck You Pay Me video, I'm not sure if we're allowed to cuss, but that's the name of the video.
I'll have to
He
check
was
that one
there,
out.
yeah, with Mike Montero. And that was the other thing. You start realizing, okay, I am running a business. I have a service that people need and they pay money for it. I shouldn't act like it's a privilege for me to work with them. And I shouldn't expect them to think it's a privilege to work with me, although I was pretty arrogant in my early 30s because I think it was a shield to block my fear and my scared little self. But that was another thing. It's like, we're in business and we should act like we're in business and we should have real contracts and we should enforce them. These were all things that were foreign to me, believe it or not. And I think to a lot of people in the web at that time. So yeah, it just, the biggest thing I think walking away from that event was that I wasn't alone. If I learned one thing, it was that there were other people trying to do what I was trying to do, and I could learn from them.
What was the original idea behind that? It wasn't meant to be a business. It was just meant to get a group together to talk shop and help each other.
Yeah. So the Gregs, as they're known in bureau lore, the Gregs basically said, if y'all will get yourself to the Kennedy School in Portland, Oregon, we'll pay for everything else. And they saw it, I think, as kind of a research opportunity where they could find out what these other people they saw doing stuff, what they knew. Right now, there was, I knew Aaron Mintley, who was there. He ran Electric Pulp, and they were doing a lot of work with Guy Kawasaki. So he was kind of an elevated kind of guy for me and a friend. I mean, he never presented himself as being, above anybody else or anything. But I remember I was with him and with Kelly Goto, and we joked that Jeffrey Zeldman was in there. And when we all got in there, it was going to be like a Batman movie. And he was going to show up on a screen and laugh, and the doors would lock, and they were just going to flood us with gas and kill us all. and all the competitors would be gone, right? And then when we went in and sat down, I was like, oh shit. Should we share? Shouldn't we share? But that's the other thing that to this day we still do at the beginning of every event. We take an oath. Now it's called the Bureau Oath. At the time, there wasn't anything like that. And it basically says, I promise not to share anything that a reasonable person would deem sensitive or confidential. So it's kind of a verbal non-disclosure agreement. And right after that, we went into a talk about layoffs because a few people were going to have a layoff and they didn't know how to do it. So it was group therapy. But the original intention was just to get together and share and try to lift all of us up, right?
Let's talk about some of those topics that people have shared in insights. Layoffs is one. You mentioned you have a couple of different webinars that are popular, talking about what time you lose with shifting attention, being scared to hire, should I stay or should I go? What has been talked about in the room about the layoff piece?
So the layoff piece, I think the biggest issue is most of us. So this is an interesting thing when you look at web shops versus digital agencies. And I saw this shift happen around 2012. Before 2012, we were just kind of craftspeople who saw a new medium and thought it would be kind of fun. And then a popular origin story is somebody was in a band and the band needed a website. So they built the website. And then another band needed one. So they called them. And then before long, they were making money building websites and they quit the band. Like this is something you hear a lot. So when people get in that room, those of us that were more of the craftspeople are very culture focused. We weren't very business focused. So a layoff we saw as a personal failure. We never thought about market conditions or shit like that. We were just like, I suck and I can't employ these people. I can't give them what they need. After 2012, you see a lot of people coming into the industry who are a digital agency. We didn't like the term agency because we left advertising agencies and we didn't want to be beholden to a client. We wanted to be beholden to the work. But after 2012, and this isn't universally true, but a lot of people who came out were more business savvy and business focused. And they would see metrics that said, we're going to have a layoff, and they would plan for it. Whereas we were still under this illusion that the people we work with are family, which I think is a very dangerous thing to believe, although I believed it for a long time. Because if it was true, I would have fired my brother a long time ago and he'd be out of my family. I'm not allowed to do that. In my company, I can't support everybody when things change. So I think when it comes to layoffs, the big challenge is always, how do we do it gracefully? And one of the things that I learned in that very first event was from Nancy Lyons, who's at Clockwork. And Nancy said, when we were doing these discussions, good news needs to travel at the same speed as bad news. And bad news has to travel at the same speed as good news because it's just news. And when you share things and you have transparency with folks so they can see what's going on with the financials, where they can see what's going on with what a lot of us in the bureau would call the weather report, right? Then they're not surprised and they understand. So I think that was a lot of it, was just nothing should ever be a surprise to somebody. The other thing that I learned the hard way was that transparency without context is terrifying. So if I tell the team we've got $400,000 in the bank, they're like, life is great and we're going to Vegas for the retreat and we're going to all these things. But if I tell them we have 2.5 months of expenses in the bank, which could very much be the exact same number, they're like, well, maybe we should take that little mom and pop restaurant down the street after all. I know it's not what our goals are, but it'll at least keep us going. So that was a big part of it. I almost
I'm
had
going
to
to use that line with John, Carl, because if we have money in the bank, he wants to spend it.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, that's a couple months of expenses. So,
well, I mean, for
John,
me,
if you're listening, that's what I'm going to tell you.
there you go. And I'm going to let him know anyway.
Yeah.
When I was running nGen, if we had more money at the end of the month than the beginning, I thought we were crushing it. I never realized there would be expenses to show up later. I just didn't pay attention, right? I was so focused on trying to do the work. But the one time I almost had a layoff, I had two friends that we had kind of agreed if either of us was in trouble, we'd shoot up a flare. One was Aaron Mentley at Electric Pulp, and the other was Marty Ringline at a shop called Include. And we had lost a project with Chase. We were about 8 people, and this was a $250,000 usability project. And and they said they were going to put it on hold. And I called them and I was like, on hold or it's never coming back. And they said, it's never coming back. So I called the team. I said, hey, we just lost this and I don't know that I can pay everybody. The only person that should probably be let go is me, but I checked with the lawyer and it doesn't work that way. I can't just fire myself and y'all keep rolling. So we got to figure out what to do. And the team all agreed to take a cut until we got through it
Hmm.
because they didn't think anybody should have to be let go. We ended up winning Epic Games like a week later and everything was fine. But I saw at that moment that by being honest with them the whole time and sharing with them that they wanted to keep going. But I think that only works when you're small. I think when you get bigger, people expect more.
Yeah. And you were transparent with it too. You could
Yeah,
have just made a decision. It sounded like your management style was kind of opening up to the team and problem solving as a team.
that was it. Again, I never wanted to be in charge. And it wasn't that I didn't want the responsibility. It was more that nGen once got called the People's Republic of nGen when I was in Bucharest at an event. Um, and I really respected that in a way. It's like not saying anything political. I thought letting everybody have some insight or some impact into their own direction. Like you think Daniel Pink can drive, right? It's like that's what it was. They needed to have some autonomy. They needed to be getting better at their craft. They needed to know that they were being taken care of intrinsically and extrinsically, at which point they should have a say in what we do because they're the ones creating it.
You know, you mentioned the layoff piece, but then on the flip side, you've done webinars on the other side, which is the hiring, and
Yeah.
people are scared to hire because they're thinking of those that Chase, when Chase left. So talk about what's the conversation like around the hiring piece and being scared to hire and the people's thoughts on when or if on that
Yeah.
topic.
So, this has been something I've played around with since the beginning. Even when I was at the advertising agency, I was like 24 and they were having a layoff. And I remember talking to Melanie, who's the only boss I've ever had and ruined me for all other bosses. Um, she said, we need to figure out who we can let go. And I said, can we just figure out who we need to keep? Because it feels like that's a different question. And it wasn't that I was that smart, it was that I was that naive. I didn't know what it would do to the culture. But when you think about it now, and the conversations that are happening in the community now, people are scared to hire because they've been through this roller coaster since the pandemic. We're like, we're having the best year ever. We're having the worst year ever. We're back to the best year ever. And they don't want that emotion. Not to mention just the impact of all of the cost. And they're tired. So because they're so tired and they're a dog that's been kicked a lot, they're nervous. Like they see the treat, but they know that it comes with a cost. So I think that's the real thing right now is everybody's kind of easing in. Plus it's an election year. So everybody knows right around September, all of their clients are going to freeze up and wait to see what happens. But again, this is nothing I would have known pre-Bureau. And it was something I hear all the time is people like, man, I wish I had had this 5 years ago. If I could have had everybody help me, like one of the things we do now is like a sales pulse survey. Every 6 weeks, we ask people 2 questions. Are sales up, steady, or down? What are people buying? And that's it. It takes less than a minute to fill out. And this will be the second one that comes out next week, I think. But what we saw is it's like a third, a third, and a third. And because of that, it is that uncertainty. The other part of it is like a lot of people are looking to outsource, which is not frowned upon the way it once was, right? Nearshoring, offshoring, amazing talent in Northern Europe, right? But then you get to this point where it's like, well, I feel like I've lost some of the control, even though we're distributed now. Something about being distributed within a time zone feels better. So that's it. And you can hire the best of the best when you go more of a contract basis, but then you lose some of the, no, I don't want to say control as much as availability. So predictability, you lose some of that predictability. And that's when you decide, really, I need to hire somebody.
You know, it's really visual when you say a dog that's been kicked. I could really relate to that as an entrepreneur. Um, and is there how are people figuring out? Is it the right time? Is it just taking a plunge? Are people looking at a certain formula that go, okay, because you never know. Like we've seen, and you've seen over decades,
Yeah.
there's all these things that can happen, hence the dog being kicked. But to get to, okay, we have to either make a decision or not. Is there something that people are considering, or what are the factors they're considering in that decision?
Yeah. So again, there are some of the folks who, like, I never knew what utilization meant, right? Until probably even 4 years ago. We started hanging out with Parallax, and they've done an amazing job with their professional services automation stuff. And the people in the community love them, but they explained to me what utilization is. So there are people, what I find is owners who were previously developers are much more in tune with looking at different formulas. Owners who were on the creative side, like writers or designers, are much more gut feel. Like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? So, and there's no right answer. That's
So
the other thing I've
Parallax would
learned.
say, look at your utilization of all across the board on the staff. And if someone's at a certain amount of utilization,
Yeah.
then you need to consider hiring, something like that.
And if your forecast is strong, like what's coming in, how busy are they? Yeah. And so that's exactly it. Um, Others would, again, with the craftspeople, sometimes it's like the work I'm going to have to take on to survive this. I don't like that work. So it's not just numbers again, right?
This is Parallax here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
What do they do?
so they are basically, they automate the back office, and they give you insights into how well your shop is running and what's coming. So are you ready for the new work that's coming in? Are
Like
you working
forecasting. Interesting.
optimally? And it's amazing. David Annis and Tom O'Neill, the two founders, they joined the bureau during the pandemic when they didn't even have a company because they wanted us to be around. So it's like I've got so much love for those guys. But I think the thing when you start looking at it and deciding when to hire, the other part of it is conversations with your peers. And that's what happens in the bureau Slack. It's almost like, back to Harry, it's almost like a lot of secret chambers in there because not everybody's together. Like depending on the service you sell or the size of your shop, or there are some secret handshake channels that people say, hey, come over here. We've got a channel called venting. And that's it. Like when you see those people get together, they start talking through it, and people will get different perspectives, but at least now they know what's worked and hasn't worked for other folks. But what I was going to say this earlier, I hope I'm not repeating myself, but the one thing I've learned being a part of all these events, being a part of this community, is there is no answer that comes down from the mountain. Everybody is different. Everybody has different goals. They have different contexts they're working within. And ultimately, they have to make a decision. I think what the Bureau does is just give them a broader expanse of information so they can see what did and didn't work for other folks, as well as getting pointed to different resources or just different content that they can consume on their own.
Yeah, I guess I kind of visualize it like a buffet a little bit, and you kind of try a little bit,
That's
and
it.
then you go back to the things that worked or you like, and then you just
Yeah.
throw out the stuff that didn't work or you didn't like, type of thing.
Yep.
So I want to get to the evolution of the services a little bit, because it started with that first event, and then you you created a business out of it essentially. But I want to go back to Melanie for a second, because I know she was a big influence on you.
Biggest, yeah.
And what made her a great boss? What were some of the characteristics? And I'm sure you have brought some of those into your own world.
Yeah, one of the things about Melanie was she was a siren. Um, she just communicated so well. Now, there were things for me personally that I thought, why is she doing that? And I couldn't figure it out. I didn't know until I ran my own company. And when you run your own company and there's nobody left to blame, you start understanding why somebody else did something. She was really great at making people feel inspired, at making them feel like we can please the client and please ourselves. She used to always say, okay, the client's happy, let's get to work. Because we knew whatever we put out into the world was going to get us the next client. And she would say that too. These are not our clients, but they can get us to our clients. So let's work really hard for them. So she was just amazing at getting people's energy up and inspiring them to do the best work they could, even if they weren't motivated by the work itself. And that was one of the things I took away. She also was very in tune with the human side. And in my, I guess, mid 20s, when I was working there, I realized that they went through this process called no, what was it called? Stop at nothing. And we used to joke it should be called stop while there's something left. But basically, it was like a 360 review. Everybody in the company reviewed everybody. And I had the distinct pleasure of being considered the most valuable employee and the least valuable employee. I was the golden boy and I was Carl, spawn of Satan. And it was one of those things where I realized even then I'm treating people differently. And the reason was I would get so focused on my goal that if anybody came in to interrupt me, I would just say whatever I had to say to get them to go away. But the people that I was working with loved it. And I think because of talking with Melanie and watching Melanie, I realized I can't just be brutal to folks who aren't on my path. I have to try to help them or at least acknowledge them and share with them when I can help. But that was like such a wake up call. And without her, there's no way I could have gone on to launch my own company and have any success.
You mentioned, Carl, the interrupt me, right? And just being focused, which, I can be in that camp as well. But you had a webinar actually that someone talked about the loss of time of shifting attention. So obviously that time you were onto something, you knew what would happen with all these interruptions, even though maybe you weren't perfectly cordial about it, however you handled it. But talk about what was that, that webinar about and some of the learnings from that.
Yeah. So this was an amazing webinar from Sear. And basically, they went through and empowered one of their ops people to just do research by taking half the company and allowing them not to be in meetings that were like standing meetings, and the other half would attend all those meetings. And then they started looking at productivity. They started looking at who had to stay late, and different things of that nature. And then I think they also limited the number of different projects somebody might be on or the number of different clients they might have to see how did that impact it. And the results are the results we would expect. If you have less to do, you do a better job. You get done faster. But the other side of it, not just meetings, but that idea of deep work, of being able to turn off all of the things. It is crazy how easy it is to get a hold of somebody. But if you get those 2 hour, 4 hour blocks, you can get things done weeks earlier than if you're constantly having to remember where you were, go back in. Oh, did I write that? That's not what I meant. But that was it, and it's amazing to me because when you see somebody who's taken the time to actually implement that in their own company, it just it makes you feel stupid if you don't do it.
Are there any things that you do, whether it's productivity techniques or tools or software that you do use on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's funny. I go up and down with tools. I was using Motion, which is an AI calendar like sorting app. Um, but what I realized was I don't want, even if I tell it to give me 20-minute breaks every hour, I don't want that. I want to be able to be flexible, and it's going to tell me something's late because I decided to do it tomorrow, and I don't want to have to click 3 places to do that. So I'm a Todoist fan. I used Todoist, I went away from it, and now I'm back to it. And the reason is I can just tell it I'm going to do that tomorrow, and it doesn't care. It's not going to yell at me. But the bigger thing for me is I really try not to start any important work until 11. So I'll start my days normally with a longer run. Like I went for a run this morning before the podcast, and I'll normally listen to what depends on what I'm doing. Like if I need to run slower, I'll listen to a book. If I just need to be able to think, I'll listen to more instrumental type music. And if I just need to get some aggression out, then I'm going to go with arena rock or just something ridiculous and just, like, and just some guilty pleasure and just run my ass off. But what it does is when I do sit down at 11, I find that I'm so focused. I'm so ready. Like my brain has had a chance to process all the other crap. Um, I only reply to email once a day. I know I'm hesitating to say that because it's really hard. Because in our world, I see my goal is making sure people get the help they need. A far cry from the 24-year-old who was like, get the fuck out of my office. Um, and so sometimes that help comes in through email. Sometimes it comes in through Slack. But what I've realized over the past few weeks, or actually the first 2 months of this year were really hard because I had personal stuff going on and I wasn't able to pay attention to my role like I wanted to. And what I found was other people stepped up and helped them. And this harks back. I know I'm off on a little tangent here, but when I originally joined the bureau, like I was an attendee initially, and then my company was doing pretty well. And I just started doing things and they said, hey, do you want to join? Do you want to be a part of us? And I was like, yeah, I think so. And I was reading through an email that the Gregs had sent me, and my youngest daughter, Alyssa, came out, and she would have been 14 at the time. No, maybe a little bit younger even. Yeah, she would have been younger. She would have been 13. And she came out and she asked me how I wanted to be remembered.
That's a
And
pretty
it was
deep, that's a pretty intense question.
she is an old soul. And I said, I just want to be remembered as somebody who was successful and didn't have to hurt anybody, right? I don't want to have to do anything negative to someone in order to succeed. And then she said, well, how are you going to measure that? Now, you think, why would a child, 13 is not a child, but why would she say that? Well, we had built a store for Shopify with cat string because she thought the cost is low, cats love it, we'll make a killing. And friends at Shopify actually were going to demo the store and stuff, but she lost interest. But so I told her, I said, all right, well, how are you going to measure success? So she asked, how are you going to measure that? And I said, by the number of people I help. And then she said, how does it scale? And I said, I don't know. And then I found out my wife might have put her up to it because they were both in the kitchen.
She's reading off index cards. It's like,
Yeah,
what are
kinda.
those? Why is this not in your
But
handwriting?
But then I went back, to the email with the Gregs, and I was like, I don't have to help anybody. That's how it scales. I just put people in a position to help each other. And the first 2 months of this year, I remembered that because I have to extract myself from the community and just be the conduit that gets everybody who they need. Because the other thing is, I'm going to have to find a Dread Pirate Roberts at some point. I can't keep being the person who's like guiding the ship. And this, the Bureau is going to go on. It's its self-sustaining entity. It's shown that through the pandemic, it grew, like membership grew over 1,000% in 2.5 years. So for me, it's like, I think that's the biggest thing is I just have to make sure that I am putting it in its best position to succeed, no matter who is deciding what programming is, or all that stuff is superficial. It's the conversations. It's the support that happens in the Slack, in the hallways at the events, all that kind of stuff. Ooh, you got me worked up. You got me worked up, Doc.
Carl, I think I should have been interviewing your daughter with questions
Yeah.
like, how do you measure success and how does it scale? What does she do now?
She's actually a TikTok influencer.
Okay.
She's got about 950,000
All
followers.
right. Well, let's check her out. What's her
Mm.
TikTok? I don't know if you call it a handle or whatever. I don't know if you know it, but
It is pedestrian lesbian, and she is
okay.
not safe for work.
All right. I don't know if I'm her demographic, but I'll check it out.
Yeah, she is a cosplayer, and she's been taking a short break, but she's close to signing a deal with Hulu right now, which could be pretty fun.
Wow.
Yeah, you should
That's
interview
crazy.
her. She's a
All right.
badass.
We'll check her out. Thanks for sharing that. So from the evolution standpoint, running Bureau of Digital,
Mhm.
it's amazing to me how much you have going on with Bureau of Digital and how efficient the team is. So talk about the evolution of hiring to handle Bureau of Digital and what you were
Yeah,
looking for.
so when I took over, there were two people. Brett Harned, who had been there from the beginning with the original idea. He was at Happy Cog working with Greg Hoy. And then Lori Averett, who has been with me for 26 years over four companies. So it was the three of us, and we sat down and said, what do we want to do? And I remember saying all roads need to lead to membership. And then we didn't do anything with membership really until the pandemic. So, but but it was one of those things where we were like, what can we do? What do we want to do? And then we started asking the community, what do you want? Like, what do you want to do? But as we went through, Brett had his own thing, so he was kind of part-time. Lori and I were going full-time. And then slowly we hired until we were a team of about 8. We had one person who was doing more marketing. We had other people who were helping facilitate the events. It's weird. If I go back and look at it, I'm not sure what all 8 of us did. And then when the pandemic hit, and we ended up upside down $250,000 in deposits at venues that were saying they weren't going to give them back. That you can have the events, it's fine. COVID is not a thing. We're not going to force majeure. No, no, no. We're holding on to it. And then we had about $70,000 in ticket refunds we had to give. So I told the team, I was like, look, I got about 5 weeks of being able to pay you. Please don't stay out of loyalty. If you have somewhere you can go, please go. That's the healthiest thing you can do for everyone. And for the most part, everybody went. We had great people. They had places they could go, even during the pandemic when things were so weird. So it ended up being just me and Lori. And we kind of went, I told everybody, we're going to go on life support, float through space, try to find a habitable planet. And at that point, uh, people in the community just started doing stuff on their own. They actually contacted Slack. This is a pivotal change in the community. We had 1,600 people in Slack. It was the free version. So every 10,000 messages, you would lose a message. So you would try to go back and find stuff and it just wouldn't be there. And you knew you had that conversation. So somebody contacted Slack and said, hey, we're talking about work from home protocols. We're talking about EIDL and PPP. We're talking about all these things and it keeps disappearing. Can you please turn on the paid version? I still to this day don't know who called them. And they said, okay. And so they turned on, they said, we'll give you 2 months of the paid version to help you get through this. And when they did that, over 800,000 messages suddenly became available. And people were searching and getting amazing information. And I remember going, we can never go back. We can never go back. But it was going to cost over $4,000 a month with the 1,600 people. So that was when I was like, okay, well, we've got to do this membership thing. David C. Baker is part of the community and a good friend. And David contacted me and said, hey, I sense that you're probably hurting. If you want to spend a few days together and can get to Nashville, I'm happy to work through this with you. So I went and David was so gracious and we worked together for about a day. And Blair Inns, who's a friend as well. And Blair was like, well, if you're doing membership, let's do, we'll have 3 levels and that his whole, thing. And we figured all that out. And then we turn on membership and it just starts selling. Now, what I didn't know was until later, people in the community who've been there for a long time put out videos about what the Bureau meant to them. And so these videos started going not viral, but in our small world, they went viral. And so people started buying membership. We would have $15,000 membership days. We have $30,000 membership days. And I'm just sitting there going, what is happening? What is this? And then I told people that Slack was going to be a membership perk. Only one person got really angry, and I had a phone call and explained it. And they were like, oh, okay. I didn't realize. I was like, yeah, we're going to have to pay for this eventually. And every person's going to cost a certain amount of money, and we got to do this. But the best part of that whole thing was, again, I saw that the community is going to run itself. It is going to save itself. And today, if you look at it, we had 79 members like pre-pandemic, because I didn't want membership to get in the way of somebody getting support. Our mission was to provide support to people who don't have it working in the digital services. That was kind of it, right? And today we have over 1,200 members. It's terrifying. I don't know who these people are, what they want from me. But I did tell somebody the other day, I said, what's it like running the Bureau? I said, well, running is an interesting word. I say, it's kind of like being on the back of a Bronco bull. And you're just holding on to it, and it's kicking and it's trying to throw you off. And occasionally it turns its head around and it makes eye contact and it smiles and it goes, I love you. And then it turns back around and just keeps beating the shit out of you, right? But the thing is, that love makes it all worth it. And my life is great. It's not like I'm staying up late at night trying to figure out how to do things. It's just I fail so much in this little playground, but they don't care. They're just happy that somebody's there trying to give them a better way to connect.
What do you consider when you say you fail so much? What are some of those things that stick out?
I'm going to say one, and anybody listening will be like, no, it's amazing. I'm like, is it? But Bureau Circle. So we had people really wanted us to do an EO or a Vistage type offering. But to do that and have an actual coach, and we have, like, Steve Guberman has been an amazing support. He's part of the community and he runs masterminds and does all that stuff. But we wanted to include it in the cost of membership. So when you've got 1,200 people and you're trying to find 8 to 10 to be in a group together and have it be self-running, that's a challenge. And you can only launch so many out of the gate. We ended up launching 3 total before I was like, this isn't really adding value. And so now you've got all these other people who are like, but I thought I was going to get in one. So that to
It was
me
something they were striving for to do.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
I couldn't find enough people for them and their space. And so that to me felt kind of like a failure. Integrating AI into Slack. Like, we had it going really well. And then a couple of members, and they rightfully so, said this violates the Bureau oath. You're not supposed to share things outside of the context of the people who had the conversation. And OpenAI is saying that they're using this for training purposes. So Gabe Levine, who was there at the first Bureau meeting, and one of my good friends is also our lawyer, and we looked at the end user license agreement. We looked at all the stuff, and according to OpenAI, they weren't using it. But then people said they were. So I had to stop that. And I have been struggling to find a way to do recaps, because the number one reason people leave the Bureau is there's too much and they feel like they're not taking advantage. And I'm like, damn it, we should do less. So that's also part of that context of, okay, we're throwing stuff up against the wall. Not everything's going to stick. And I learned this running my company. The absolute worst thing you can do is be marginally successful. If you are great at what you do and you make a killing and people love it, that's awesome. If it sucked out of the gate and nobody paid attention, that's great, actually. It's when you have, like, we launched a product that had a few thousand people using it, and then we said, this isn't enough. We had a few thousand people mad at us because they really loved it. And so I feel that way with the Bureau too. It's like I have to be more careful about what I'm going to share. Trying to put on in-person events and then having to do them online because not enough people bought tickets. So things like that are what I consider, it's not necessarily a failure, but that's how it feels.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. I had someone on, Justin Goff, who's had a company, sold it, just a top direct response marketer copywriter, and it's exactly what he said is,
Yeah.
When something's marginally successful, that's the killer because you keep doing it as opposed to it's obviously a clear line if it's like it didn't work or it
Yep.
just blew it out of the water. So
Yeah.
thanks
It's
for that
painful.
reminder on that one.
But let me go back for just a second because you were asking how can we run so efficiently. The other thing, Dale Bertrand, who runs a shop called Fire and Spark, this is the other thing. Most search firms are now AI firms. And the reason why is because they were really good at math. They understood algorithms. They understood how to get that stuff to do stuff. He came to me, he said he wanted to have a call, and I thought he wanted to talk about search. He wanted to talk about an ambassador program. So we have bureau ambassadors. And we're actually just now, like I mentioned, the first 2 months were a little shaky for me. We're just now kind of getting our new batch of ambassadors together. And so sometimes they run a club, like a book club. Sometimes they just host events. We were at a point where I was supposed to host everything and I couldn't do it. So now we were unable to do the things we want. So now they host events. They might have, we had a love and business group, which was if you're working with your significant other, right? If you're in business and in life together, like that's certain challenges. So those ambassadors, we have about 18 of them. And this year is the first year that we have senior ambassadors. So Chris Manley and Maura Miller are two people who've been with the community for a while, and they are going to kind of be, I guess, like coaches on the field, just to help get things done. And it's so funny because the initial meeting is going to be next Wednesday, and I can't make it. And they were like, "Well, yeah, that's the point. We're still going to have it." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah."
How did you structure the ambassador program? These are
Very
obviously, they're all members of Bureau of Digital.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, and I would say I structured it very poorly. So basically, I just said, "Do y'all want to do something?" And they said yes, and I said, "Do it." So I'll also say that we have a group right now that's rebranding. This was Laura Boyer, who runs a shop called Black Bean out of Vancouver. And Laura contacted me 6 months after being in the community and said, "Hey, the women's leadership group is kind of crappy. Can I start like a one night a month we get together?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And she was like, "I want to call it the Bad Bitches Wine Night. Is that okay?" And I was like, "I am not going to tell you what you can or cannot call your group." Um, and so they did, and now she has 100 people in that group. And they dropped the wine night because, some people have challenges. I don't have, I'm soberish, but it's one of those things where, they get together and they just talk. And in that channel, like I'm an honorary bad bitch, so I get to be in there. But it's one of those things where in that channel, you hear those conversations and it's just heart wrenching to see what they're doing. She wasn't an official ambassador, but she is now. So that's what they do. We have one that runs a lunch club. So if people want to get together and just meet different members, it's kind of a little serendipity thing to throw them around. But now they have a little bit more support. So when they have questions and stuff, they don't have to wait for a long time.
I'm curious, Carl, you said you really talked and sat down with David and Blair to talk about the membership piece. I'm just going to bring up the website for a second because
Sure.
what's included in pricing is tough I think for me, it's tough to figure out like what's the right art and science. So I'm wondering when you were talking to them, and now we're looking at it. Now, if you're looking at this point in time, it could have changed. So don't hold, Carl to this, but you could check it out on bureaudigital.com and there's a membership page. But there's a connect level as this point in time, a lead level and a partner level. Talk through some of that conversation with Blair and David and how you came to some of these and how you decided on the price point as well.
Yeah. So this was in 2020. And these were the levels in 2020. Now, before that, there was a learn, a connect, and a lead. And the learn level was no longer going to be effective because it wouldn't pay for Slack. And to not be in Slack actually felt like not being a member. So it was a challenge. The learn level used to mean you got the events at a discount or for free. So connect is really the main level. And until 2023 or 2023, it was $49 a month and $4.99 a year. And with the Connect level, you get Slack, you get all the online events, all the webinars at no cost. You get discounts on the workshops, discounts on the in-person stuff, but it's an individual membership. If you go with the lead, you actually get a discount because you get 6 people in there, kind of for the cost of 5. And I think that's right. I'm not great at math, theater major. And I told myself I wasn't going to say that anymore about, self-deprecating. Theater majors are awesome. But you get everything. It's just for more people. And the other thing about that is it's for your entire team. So only 6 people get into Slack, but your entire team actually gets the discounts and the free online events and that sort of thing. And then at the lead level, if you want to add somebody else, that comes at $100 year discount. So that's the other part. We have lead members who actually have 12 or 13 people in there, and it really makes sense for them. The partner level is people who really want to be known in the community. And I don't put a lot of description there because it's different for every person. For example, if Navigate the Journey is one of our partner levels.
You're some of the
Now,
partners, I'm assuming, right? This is,
yeah.
yeah.
So if you look at what a great example is Upsourced, right? So Upsourced is actually one of our partners, and anytime they have content that they want to share, we share it across the network. Anytime somebody asks for help when it comes to advertising, when it comes to accounting, in terms of digital services, we point them to Upsourced. So it's one of those things where also not everybody that asks to be a partner, even though that money is really lucrative, not everybody that asks actually gets accepted. So that's the other part of it. But the other thing is I'll reach out to them when we're getting ready to do something, say in the newsletter, and I'll be like, hey, do you have an article that would be good for this? Because I want to do some pull quotes or I want to draw stuff out. And so that the partner level, they're not necessarily in it to get business. Some of them, for example, Leslie Camacho, who's an EOS coach, Leslie did it because he was getting so much work from the Bureau that he felt like it was giving back, right? So that's another thing. It is an ecosystem. There are people, if somebody accepts you and your service and then shares it in the community, it's almost like a spark that lights a fire. By the same token, if you do a little bit of harm, they may also they may say, hey, you know what? That sucked. And my thing, I tell everybody, as long as people have a reason to say what they say, they're not being offensive and they're not hurting someone or betraying somebody's trust, I'm going to let it stand. Because it's not my job to make sure it's wine and roses. It's my job to make sure it's valuable and real.
So it started off, if we look at it, back to your first event, it was like almost like a free event. I mean, someone was paying for it. The Gregs were paying for it at the time. And then it became more events, and then online events, and then actually a community where there's events, online, virtual, and kind of an online Slack community where people can network. And then there's ambassadors that kind of create other, events, virtual or in person as well. And it started off from free to whatever it was per event and virtual event to $49 a month to $89 a month, and then on up.
Yep.
I'm curious because this comes up a lot in the agency conversations. When you raise the pricing, do you grandfather people in or do you raise them? And because this happens with all agencies, like they have these grandfathered in legacy clients, and 7 years later, they're still paying the same. How do they raise them, or do they not raise them? So I'm curious on how you handled that particular situation.
So I told everybody as we got close to 2023 that I was not going to raise their membership. And the reason was they were the ones that got us here. And they had created this robust community where we had all this information. So it wasn't fair for somebody new coming in to get it at the same price they had because they were part of building it. So that's why we were increasing the cost. And the cost was increased based on surveying the current community and some conversations that I had. And I'll never forget, somebody said, I pay this much for AIGA, or I pay this much for Vistage, or I pay this much for whatever. I get more value out of the community here. So I would gladly pay more. So that was a big part of it. And I'll be honest, I told Blair, I was like, I think this partner level is kind of out of reach. And then we sold 4 in the first month. And I remember I called him back. I was like, what's happening? And he was like, some people just like to buy the most expensive thing. And I was like, damn it.
Good thing you listened to him.
Oh yeah. No. I learned a long time ago. Oh, especially because I'm a time and materials guy. And Blair obviously isn't. But he's a kinder, gentler Blair now. And I'm a more open individual as well. But again, there's no one path to success, right? Everybody's got different things that they're doing. But yeah, I am glad that I listened because he was absolutely right.
Yeah, I mean, and part of it too, Carl, is that people are getting huge, tremendous value out of it. And so they want to, like you said, that one person, like, this is so valuable for me. I want to up level what I'm doing and, my involvement. So it's just a way for them to do that on a different level. We have to talk a little about some of the learnings of nGen, because there's so many, but maybe just pull out a few of those biggest ones. But I do want to point out, this is the video I think you were talking about, which is
It is.
that people can check out of Mike Montero,
Yeah.
Fuck You, Pay Me from Creative Mornings. And so people can
Yep.
check that out. I didn't realize it was gonna be 38 minutes, but it's great. I'm
Well,
looking
it's
forward to checking this out.
the best part is he's got a call and response where it's like when a client does something that goes against the contract, Mike will go, fuck you. And the audience goes, pay me. And it's one of the happiest moments. Like when I haven't watched it in a while. And also Gabe had hair in this video, which he's shaved it now. So those are the two things I love.
All right, so I'll check this one out, and then I think this is is this your daughter's
Yep.
channel, Pedestrian?
That's
Okay,
my daughter's channel.
so
Yeah.
people can check that out. Pedestrian Lesbian right here on TikTok.
Yep.
So nGen.
Yeah. Quite a few things I learned. Actually, I happen to have this right here. So I'm just going to share this. This was our first promotion. We give good web with a phone number. We did a photo shoot. We actually shot that at a urinal. I won't read the body copy. I would say don't do this. We sent out about 5,000 of these to corporations.
Why at the urinal? I'm curious.
Oh, because that's where you would find that somebody had said they give good web.
Ah, got it. Okay.
Yeah. We got one call
with your phone number there. I'm getting it. Okay. I'm a little slow on the uptake. Gotcha.
We got one call and they said never do that again. But I would say the thing I learned from nGen,
yeah,
we positioned ourselves as the best, and we weren't. And we didn't fake it till we made it kind of thing. We just, well, I guess we did. We just got good. But we also only did what we knew how to do. We were great at original animation. We were a flash shop, and I apologize to nobody. It was glorious. We did original soundtracks. We did all of this kind of custom content that was great. But some of the things I learned were, if you act like you belong there, people treat you like you belong there. Our first client was Chase. And they just saw the work that we were doing and the way that we handled ourselves. We didn't have a business plan. Instead, we just had kind of a list of rules. One of them was, no matter how big the coffers get, we won't build Valhalla. I'd come from a place that had a conference table that cost $40,000 to ship from Italy. To ship. I have no idea what the table itself costs. And I was just like, when we start, we're not going to do that. We also had some simple rules, like when the phone rings, we'll answer it. We'll be nice. Honest and nice are not opposite. You can be nice and tell the truth. and we'll make good commitments and keep them. Those were like the three reasons we were successful. We responded to people when they contacted us. We always had a smile, even if we had bad news, and we did what we said we were going to do. And I think one of the biggest ones was a lot of people like bash clients. And you have to realize you're the person that let them in the door. If you don't know why you let them in the door, if they changed, and every client changes, we put together, after our 100th project, we put together kind of a playbook for clients that explained where things normally go off the rails, ways to keep things on, on track and on budget. And what we realized after 100 projects was there's only one constant. It's us. Why are we driving them to do what it is they're doing? And I finally realized, because we weren't communicating in the way they needed us to. Clients don't want to drive. They just want to know you are, right? They have their day job. This project showed up. But the other really big one I would say is there are two types of clients that we came up against. Now, we had a good cash foundation. If you have good cash, you can make good decisions. If you don't, you still make good decisions, just different ones. We learned not to take checklist clients. If somebody showed up because their boss told them this needed to get done, that person was going to disappear. That person was going to get pulled into something else. They did not have decision-making authority. They were going to give you bad input. They just wanted you to go away and do the thing. And then when you showed up, they were like, that's not what we wanted. We wanted must-win clients. Checklist clients, bad. Must-win clients, good. Must-win clients are the ones that are going to lose their job if this fails. Their business will go under if this is not successful. So examples of that are not necessarily startups, but maybe like a company that's 3 years in. We wanted a company that knew who they were, and they'd maybe gone through a growth spurt, and what used to work doesn't work anymore. We wanted a client that knew that they suddenly had new competition and they didn't know how to address it, because those clients will answer the phone night or day. They will be there in a heartbeat, and they will give you answers, and they will listen to you because they know you know more than they do about what you're doing. We used to do this thing called the level set at the beginning of each kickoff meeting, where I would start it and I would say, my name is Carl. I will be keeping a high vantage point over the whole project, and I have worked on 381 web projects. And then it would go to Lori, and she'd be, my name is Lori. I'm air cover. So I will take your questions and your calls, but I will protect the team so that they're allowed to keep working so that we can stay on budget and on schedule. And I have worked on 72 web projects. And so everybody on our team would do that and say the number of projects they'd worked on. Then when it came to the client, it would be like, my name is Michael. I will be your day-to-day contact. And I've worked on 2 web projects, one with my son. And you would just go, okay, so you know your business and we know the web, right? And that changed everything when we got that done. So there's your rapid fire answers.
I love that. Carl, I have one last question. And first of all, I just want to thank you. Thanks for sharing the journey, the lessons, so many there. And check out bureauofdigital.com to learn more. But the last question is just some of your favorite resources. It could be software tools. It could be a book that you love, a business book. Some of your favorite resources, because I'm sure you hear a lot thrown around in the agency world of what, they're always asking, what do you use for this CRM? What do you use for this project management? So some of the on your list of favorite tools and resources.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying the Daily Stoic. Like I start my mornings with that. I just started that maybe a month ago. And I start with the oldest first. I always have done that. So I can see how it evolves. But there's something great about having somebody, and I read some stuff on Seneca and Marcus Aurelius before, but having somebody just apply it to modern day, like you make this connection, and it gives me this moment at the beginning of the day just to realize that it's all so much bigger than whatever I've got to get done today. Like it's all going to be fine. So I think that one's really important to me. There's a book I love that's not I don't know that it translates as well today, but it's called The Starfish and the Spider. And what I love about it is it's about centralized versus decentralized teams, or not, that's not even right, but basically leaderless organizations. And the idea is if you're a spider and your head gets cut off, the organization dies. If you're a starfish and you get cut in half, you grow into two new starfish. And for me, running a community, and when I ran nGen and we were trying to get a community type feel, the way that the jellyfish model ran, that meant that I didn't have to be there. Again, I had an irrelevance strategy. So Starfish and the Spider kind of helped me understand more about how not to be there. There are parts of it right now that just just don't translate to today, but I still love it. Yeah, and then actually a book that I love right now is called Outlive, which is not really a business book, but I think it's such a self-care book that it helps you with everything else that you're doing. In terms of tools, again, Todoist. I mean, I just love it for myself personally. And I am starting to appreciate HubSpot. It took a while. It's a bit of a learning curve. And the reason I love it though, is because we've had almost 20,000 people come through bureau events, former members, just different people in what we would call the bureauverse, right? The bigger community. And with HubSpot, when somebody emails me, I can quickly see not only how I know them, but where did I see them last? What did they attend? What are the things they seem engaged with? So that then when I respond to them, it's more real, or it's, I hate the word, genuine and authentic. We bastardized all these terms. So I'm just going to go with more real. We'll just go with that.
And obviously Slack too.
Yeah, I hate them. I mean, I gotta be honest. They changed the pricing when Salesforce bought them. And I know the team that worked on the design and all that stuff, Andrew and the team that worked on the original Slack. And I love those guys, but they changed it. They changed the meaning of active user, which increased the cost almost 30%. And then they increased the price. We pay $75,000 a year for Slack, y'all.
Wow.
But it's the most valuable thing for the community. So I love it for them. Personally, well, I won't say that in case there's a legal thing that happens later.
Are there other alternatives people are considering with Slack that you know of? Because I'm sure you're not the only one. I mean, people have experienced this, and I'm not sure what are other options people are looking into on that.
So in terms of communities, it would be Circles. In terms of other software that's similar, it would be Discord. But I surveyed the community, and you would have thought pitchforks and torches were coming. And the reason is, and I've talked to people who've made
people are used to it already.
Well, and it's where they are, right? If you think about location, that is Slack. Community organizers that I've talked to who have moved away from it have seen a loss of about 30% of their community doesn't make the transition. So it is, the devil that I love.
Maybe we should all buy Salesforce stock then. If it basically, that's what you're telling me from this. We don't give stock tips here, but Carl, thank you so much. So many lessons, so many amazing resources. Everyone check out bureauofdigital.com to learn more. And Carl, appreciate you. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. This was fun. Thanks, everybody.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.